What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. And today we're talking some college football DFS ahead of week 7, the Friday 3-game slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all content goes live. It helps us a ton, so thank you if you've done that. And we are brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus of up to $100 for new users. They're also giving you 1 free month of Odd Shopper, which has all kinds of sports betting tools, straight bet, sides, totals, and player props, which are going to help you with places like Prize Picks. And we have projections for that as well, especially on the college football side. Tons of sports, niche sports as well, so check them out. Must be 21 or older. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, we bring you behind the glass to our data usage tool. Awesome 3-game slate here. Kicks off with Tulane, Memphis. Tulane is a 5-point favorite. The total in the game, 55 points. Tulane plays a little slow, 109th. They have a 39.5% pass rate. Memphis is 62nd in pace with a 52% pass rate. Great spot for quarterbacks. On the Tulane side, we have Michael Pratt, affordably priced. He's very mobile, and he's shown that in recent games. The guy's basically played in 3 games this year, averaging 222 through the air, hyper efficient. If he's ever coaxed into a shootout or if Tulane ever gets down and this volume rises, the efficiency for Pratt is just ridiculous. And then what he gives you on the ground is a bonus here. He is probably the most mobile signal caller on this slate. So that is a feather in his cap and gives him a very good floor and a strong price-adjusted projection. For the backfield, Mekhi Hughes, the redshirt freshman, he's basically taken over. 22 carries last week. He's now had 14 carries or more in 3 of the last 4 games. He's averaging 15 per game. And his pass rate, I guess I should say his route share, not his pass rate. His route share has risen in this offense, which is strong. Last week, we saw him come in at 44% of the routes. That was a season high for Mekhi Hughes. More involvement, more responsibility has been good for everyone in this backfield. The only wrinkle, Shedrick Lewis didn't play. There was no news of an injury, so this maybe is performance related. I don't know. They still use Shady Clayton Johnson a little bit. He's more of a pass catching back. And then Arnold Barnes has been carrying occasionally. Just worth noting, it's not a full bell cow workload for Mekhi Hughes, but it's still a very good workload nonetheless. Memphis allowing 4.8 yards per carry, so awesome matchup. Receiving game is pretty straightforward for Tulane. Lawrence Keys is your one. I think you could Jaquan Jackson, Chris Brazell, they're 2-3. It's very hard to rank them. Jaquan Jackson's way more efficient. He's averaging fewer targets per game. It's 3.8 to 4.4. Brazell is leading in that department, but their routes are pretty similar. I think over the course of the season, you're going to see Jaquan Jackson play more. Last game, 76% of the routes, Brazell 60. I'll take Jaquan Jackson over Brazell, but when you factor in price, it becomes very, very close between these two players. Rotational guys, Keith Brown, 28% route share. Dante Fleming didn't play in the last game, so if he returns, maybe that muddles things a little bit. You got a rotation at tight end between Bauman and Carter. Even Reggie Brown will get some. So it's not too interesting once we get beyond the top 3 receivers. I'm focusing my attention to them. Memphis, Seth Hennigan, maybe the second best price-adjusted signal caller on this slate. I think both of these guys, they're in the top 3 for sure. However you want to order them, that's up to you, but these are 2 very good plays. Hennigan's mobile as well, 132 cumulative yards. This team passes more and they're faster, so he has 35 attempts per game, which propels him to 275 pass yards per contest. Awesome floor for Hennigan. Matchup semi-tough here, but he gets it done in multiple ways. He's another very strong price-adjusted quarterback. These 2, they have to be in the top 3. Running back Blake Watson is number 1 in my rankings, 20.4 touches per game. He's averaging 91.6 rushing yards. And oh boy, is he ever involved in the pass game. 46.2 receiving yards. This guy has a route share north of 70%. Generally, teams' backfields, if you look at how many routes they participate in, as a collective, it's around 80 because running backs pass block sometimes. So Blake Watson being at 70, 75% in some of these games, he's the only back running routes. He's the only back getting snaps. No matter what kind of game script this is, Blake Watson should be a very strong consideration in your lineups. At receiver, we kind of have seen a top 2 emerge. Rock Taylor and Demir Blankumsey. 7.2 targets per game for Taylor, 6.4 for Blankumsey. And then Blake Watson's actually their 3rd most targeted player, just for your reference. but they're the only two guys at the receiver position that have route shares north of 70% on the season. And we've seen a rotation beyond them. So I think if you're focusing your attention on a Memphis pass catcher, these are the two best players you can get to. Once you get beyond that, Kobe Drake, 29% route share. Joe Skates, 43%. Towski Dove, he's in the 20s. And occasionally they'll use multiple tight ends. Anthony Lanfear is the main one. The problem with Lanfear is he's just not targeted really ever. So his routes fluctuate between 70 and 85%. But man, targets per route are really low with Lanfear, just 2.2 targets per game. I'd probably find my way to a different punt option, but the top two, Demir Blankenship and Rock Taylor, come in as strong price-adjusted plays. Fresno State, Utah State, the battle of the backup quarterbacks. 4-point spread in favor of Fresno, 57 total. Oh, before I get going further on this, I always forget to do this. If you want access to this sheet and all our data, our projections, our ownership projections, we have a package at Stokastic. The link is in the video description below. Again, you're going to get all those projections. You get access to this sheet, so you no longer have to pause the video and look at the data yourselves. It gives you full access, as well as a matchups tool as well. I am just a moron, and I always forget to tell you guys how to get this. So the link is below. Take advantage of it if you would like it. All right, back to Fresno, Utah State. So we got through the Vegas stuff. Fresno is a slight favorite in a game with a good total. Fresno is 79th in pace. They have a 60% pass rate. Utah State, 7th in pace with a 55% pass rate. Both these teams probably see their pass rate drop a little bit because they're both playing their backup quarterbacks. I think this affects Fresno State more so than Utah State, where we have Logan Fife under center, he's been there for a while. We've seen him at times, and it hasn't looked pretty. He flat out should not be more expensive than Pratt or Hennigan. So that's about all I have to say with Fife. Big tournaments, sure, fire him up, but he hasn't shown anything as a passer, and he doesn't run much. The backfield, this is sneaky. Malik Sherrod got hurt in their last game, and it's not listed on DraftKings. I don't know if he plays. He came into the game with an ankle injury. He was actually missing tons of time in the beginning of the year, and he aggravated it. When he was out, Elijah Gilliam had a monster role in this backfield. I don't know what the split is going to look like. If Sherrod suits up, he has been leading a timeshare of late. It's been about a 70-30 split, but there's a chance he's limited. It's closer to 50-50. There's a chance he's out, and Elijah Gilliam would immediately take on a workhorse role, which would make him among the top price-adjusted plays on the slate. Late news situation, make sure to monitor Malik Sherrod. Receiver is tricky here. They've benched Eric Brooks, and I'm not sure why. He's actually been really efficient, but his routes have plummeted. So I think he is somebody to potentially look at a fade on. Because he leads the team in targets, I imagine he'll still be owned. But so each of the first 3 games, he was above 75% of the routes, and here are his last 3. 49%, 54%, and 36% in the most recent game. 36% is not going to cut it at his price. And in his stead, Jalen Moss led the team in routes, 92%. Second was actually their tight end, Trey Watson, 80%. But then third was Mac Delana at 78%. Fourth was Jalen Gill at 64%. And then we go all the way to Brooks at 36%. He was the 5th most, involved receiver in terms of routes. From a price-adjusted standpoint, I think Jalen Moss and Mac Delana are very clearly the 2 most involved guys. They actually saw the targets reflect that too. 11 targets for Moss last game, 10 for Delana. Jalen Gill doesn't run a ton of routes, but he's very involved. And then Brooks, his routes are plummeting, which is weird to me. I don't know why. Maybe he's dealing with an injury that we don't know about. But at 6,800, there's plenty of studs we can get to, and I think Brooks is probably the one I'm going to sacrifice. Utah State, Cooper Legas is going to be under center. McKay Hillstead is out. Cooper Legas has pretty good mobility. We've seen him start for multiple years now, and he actually was the week 1 starter. The efficiency passing-wise hasn't been too different. You have a more like big play equity with Hillstead, but Legas, he doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He doesn't take a lot of chances. And I think he has a pretty safe floor. Like, if you told me this guy passed for 230 yards and rushed for 30, maybe 1 to 2 touchdowns, I'd say, yeah, that sounds about right. It makes sense with his efficiency, how fast this team plays, and their pass rate. So I like Legas if you need some savings at quarterback. I would rank him 4th among signal callers on this slate, behind Hennigan behind Pratt and behind Shedeur Sanders. Running back. Completely depends on game script. This team passes a ton, but they're willing to embrace the run when playing from ahead, as we saw in their last game. Devon Booth, 14 carries. Robert Briggs, 19 carries. Rasul Faison, 9 carries. It's a three-way committee, but it's kind of split 40-40-20. Booth and Briggs splitting at the 40% mark. Faison taking whatever's left, like 20% of the backfield. Because of that, Briggs is really cheap, especially on FanDuel where he's 47. But we know Fresno is a backup quarterback. We could maybe see Utah State lead in this game. I don't hate throwing darts on Booth and Briggs. They're good tournament plays, in my opinion, because we've seen what they're willing to do when playing from ahead. Very, very massive upside with these backs. Plus, they have Laga under center. Probably don't want to air it out quite as much. Receivers, cut and dry. Terrell Vaughn, Jalen Royals, these are your top two. Both have a 90+% route share this year. 31% of the targets are funneled through Vaughn, 22% through Royals. Neither has seen fewer than 7 targets in any of the last 4 games. Like, these two guys are locked in bona fide studs. You can play either of them without hesitation, and I'll be doing just that. It's beyond that where things get a little weird for Utah State and tough to decipher. They've rotated wide receiver threes through most of the year, and they've kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit. Last week, Micah Davis, 76% of routes, Colby Bowman at 24%. However, the week prior was the exact opposite. Colby Bowman, 75% of the routes, Micah Davis, 32%. I don't know if an injury is involved here. We've also seen these two guys split like 50-50 in certain games. They're pretty dicey, so I don't feel good about either one of these players. These are large field tournament plays. I would rather play Colby Bowman because of the price, but honestly, if you're getting down to Micah Davis, Colby Bowman, you can just play Brock Lane. His route share, 57% on the year. It's been up above 80% in each of the last 2 games in 3 of the last 4. He wasn't targeted in their most recent contest, but that's a guy that's averaging 3.5 targets per game. He had at least 4 targets in his 3 prior games. I'd rather play Brock Lane at 3,200 than most of the other punts on this slate. Last game, Stanford, Colorado, 11.5 point spread in favor of the Buffs, 59.5 total. Stanford slow and run heavy, 104th in seconds per play, 45.5% pass rate. Colorado's the opposite, 5th in pace, 60% pass rate. Starting with Stanford, we don't know who's under center. They platoon these guys. We've had injuries. Most recent report out of Stanford's that they're both going to continue to see snaps. It's basically a dice roll where you project those snaps at. I think they should start Daniels, but honestly, they might start Lamson. So I don't know. I'm not playing a Stanford quarterback. I'm probably not playing a Stanford runner unless I absolutely have to. Casey Filkins, EJ Smith, Cedric Irving, and Ryan Butler are all involved. Plus, they run their receivers a fair amount. Not necessary, even in a good matchup. Where I do think you can throw darts is the receiver position. John Humphreys has been out for the last 3 games. That's allowed Alec, I've actually never said this name out loud. Alec Maynard. Sorry, Alec, I have never seen you play or said your name out loud, but we'll call him Alec for now. I think he's emerged as the wide receiver 1 for this team. His route share has been extremely good, up above 90%. In 3 games straight. Second, we have Benjamin Jurasik, whose name I have said before. I think I'd rather play Jurasik straight up, just based on the upside in targets we've seen for him. They have the same amount of targets this year. Jurasik is more yards. Jurasik is more expensive, but I think he's locked into a safer role. I don't feel good about that for what it's worth. From there, you have Mudia Rubin, 61% of the routes. Tiger Bachmeier, 58%. Bryce Farrell, 33%. And then we get down to second tight end, Sam Roush, 24. It gets pretty greasy pretty fast. But as you can see, behind Jurasik and A.O. Maynard, you don't have a lot of consistent routes. I think Rubin is the most likely to see a big game, followed by Bachmeier once we're behind the big 2. Would rather just pay down and play Brock Lane than any of these guys. Colorado, Shedeur Sanders, I think, could be ranked anywhere from 1 to 3 on the rankings. I think between Pratt, Hennigan, and Shedeur, he's the least safe because he takes a ton of sacks. 30 sacks this year, -60 rushing yards. If he's getting you negative points. He needs a 300-yard bonus at his price. He's 9,500. He does average one per game, 336 yards, 43 attempts. So I think it's pretty likely Sanders gets a 300-yard bonus. But even then, when you price adjust, you might see Pratt and Hennigan outscore him. So I think he's a little riskier than the top two, but there's a tier of quarterback. It's Shedeur, it's Pratt, it's Hennigan, and then it's down to Lega. Fife would be fifth, and I'm not playing a Stanford signal caller. So I still like Shedeur. I love stacking him as well. We have Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn at the top. We're now getting back Travis Hunter. His role's a little shaky. We already saw Dion. I mean, he had no reluctance to, or I mean, I guess he had no reservations about playing him on offense and defense. So I do think we see quite a bit of Hunter on offense. My question is, if Stanford gets blown out, does Hunter see the coaching staff pulling back a little bit? And that's a risk because he's so important and he plays defense and he plays the weakest position on the team at corner. So I don't know what they're going to do. I think it makes them risky, and I think you could just find the extra 200 for Horn or extra 400 for Weaver, or you could go down and play wide receiver for Omarion Miller, who's now jumped Javon Antonio and Tarvarish Dawson. Tarvarish Dawson barely even had a snap last week. Antonio was at least still involved on a rotational role. I'll just pull up the routes for you instead of talking about it. Let's give you guys specifics so you know what you're dealing with. So again, this is without Hunter. You had Horn, you had Weaver as your top two. Omarion Miller, 74% of routes. Javon Antonio, 22. And then there was about 2 snaps for Tarvarish Dawson. So this will get muddled a little bit with Hunter back. I imagine Antonio is basically stripped of his role entirely. And Omarion Miller goes to that 50 to 60% route share. Splitting time with the tight end, Michael Harrison, who's been very good since the injury to Hunter. But if you remember, early in the year, they weren't using a tight end at all. Harrison had a 54% route rate in week 1 and a 29% in week 2. Then Hunter went down and his route rate soared just because they didn't have enough receivers. This is another question. Do they continue to use 11 personnel or do they go back to 10, use 4 receivers? I don't know. But anyway, the top 2 are extremely good price-adjusted plays. If you think Hunter plays as much as he was, he's going to be a great play. And then for value, Omarion Miller is a bit expensive because his role is likely stripped a little bit because of Hunter. And then Harrison, I think, is fine. There's still a chance they use 11 personnel a ton with the tight end. He's averaging 6.5 targets per game over the last 4 since Hunter got injured. So pretty good role. Anyway, that'll do it for us today. Let me know in the comments if you have a question, if I missed something, whatever it may be. I'll try to get back to you. And if I miss it, hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Matt_Gajewski. Always looking for interactions there. Otherwise, good luck, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow for the main slate. Peace.